This is the final video over of Mice and Men that I'll be doing for this class. It's over chapter 6, and it is an intensely emotional end to the book, but one we saw coming. We knew based on the title, we knew that this could not end happily, and it definitely does not. So I want to walk through the last final pages with you and allow you to see how so many of the themes come to a close here in the book. One thing hopefully you've noticed is that Curly's dog was foreshadowing for Lenny. Lenny is loyal, like Curly's dog. Lenny is obedient. I'm sorry, like Candy's dog. Uh, Lenny is obedient, uh, like a dog. Lenny is happy to see George all the time. It's like the dog, and it is George's responsibility. And so the same way that Candy prevents his dog from suffering, George prevents Lenny from the suffering that Curly wants to inflict on him, because at best he would get shot, but at worst he would get shot, suffer, and get locked up for the rest of his life in a very awful way. There aren't a lot of options for someone like Lenny at this time period. So that has been foreshadowing. It's carefully written so that you can um, draw that connection. We get this almost comical image at the beginning of the chapter of Lenny imagining this giant rabbit yelling at him and mocking him. And what you see in this like psychotic episode from him is his greatest fear. And the greatest fear he has is being left alone. He has always known that. Um, you you see this huge rabbit, and it's almost funny, as I said on page 102. The hell you wouldn't, said the rabbit. You ain't worth a grease jack pin to ram you into hell. Christ knows George done everything he could to jack you out of the sewer, but it don't do no good. He's going to beat hell out of you with a stick. That's what he's going to do. And all this is in Lenny's mind. And Lenny talks to this giant rabbit in his mind. And he says, he ain't either. George won't do nothing like that. I've known George since I forget when. He ain't never raised his hand to me with a stick. He's nice to me. He ain't going to be mean. And the fictitious rabbit says, well, he's sick of you. He's going to beat hell out of you and then go away and leave you. He won't, Lenny cried frantically. He won't do nothing like that. I know George. Me and him travels together. But the rabbit repeated softly over and over. He gonna leave you, you crazy bastard. He gonna leave you all alone. He gonna leave you, you crazy bastard. Lenny put his hands over his ears. He ain't. I tell you, he ain't. And he cried, oh, George, George, George. Lenny absolutely, completely loses it when he considers the idea of being alone. It's his greatest fear. George is going to make sure he doesn't have to ever be alone. George is going to take care of it here at the end of the chapter. But that is Lenny's greatest fear. And then we come to 103, and Lenny is trying to make him talk, and Lenny wants to hear the dream again. Now imagine how painful this is for George. George now has to recite something he knows will never come true. The only thing he wanted in this life, to share this dream with Lenny, it is all dead, and now George has to recite it all to him. And it's a chilling picture. Bottom of page 103 for me. George shook himself. He said woodenly, unfeelingly, if I was alone, I could live so easy. His voice was monotonous and had no emphasis. I could get a job and not have no mess. Lenny's making him, go through this pattern that they had. But George knows now all these awful things he said before, they're about to come true. And it is breaking him. It is physically and emotionally breaking him here. Because these words that he kind of meant before, he is horrified by. If I was alone, I could live so easy. Well, he's about to live alone, and it's not going to be so easy. Go on, said Letty. When the end of the month come, I could take my $50 and go to a cat house. And he stopped again. George is chilled because he knows this is his future now. This is his life. The things that he always said he could do when he was alone, well, that's all he has to look forward to now, and he knows how empty it is. You recall from previous chapters when he's talking to Slim and he says, guys like that, they get mean. They travel alone, they get lonely, they get mean. George is about to become like everybody else, and he knows it. Lenny looked eagerly at him. Go on, George. Ain't you going to give me hell no more? No, said George. Well, I can go away, said Lenny. I'll go right up in the hills and find a cave if you don't want me. George shook himself again. Look at, I mean, just a simple sentence, but George shook himself. He is trying to maintain composure. He says, no, I want you to stay with me here. And that means so much more than what we're seeing. This is all he wants. Lenny with him. Lenny said craftily, tell me like you done before. Tell you what, about the other guys and about us. George is going to have to say it again. George said, guys like us got no family. They make a little stake and then they blow it in. They ain't got nobody in the world that gives a hoot in hell about them. And again, George is going to lose this. But not us, Lenny cried happily. Tell about us now. George was quiet for a moment. But not us, he said. Because I got you and I got you. We got each other. That's what. That gives a hoot in hell about us, Lenny cried in triumph. I mean, George is sitting there knowing he's losing his best friend right now. He's going to tell him that the thing that makes them special is that they have each other. He's going to sit there and say this out loud. So the number of times he has to stop and shake himself and just maintain composure this is his grief and pain. This is his loss because he is enduring the reality of losing his balancing point. And now he's got to convince Lenny to take off his hat, he's going to have to actually commit to mercy killing Lenny. On page 105, Lenny says, "Tell how it's going to be." And George says, "Look across the river, Lenny. I'll tell you so you can almost see it." So he's going to let Lenny go to sleep, so to say, with this vision of the dream in his head. But George has to recite it one more time. And he tells him the story. And page 106, George says, Lenny says, "Go on, George. When are we going to do it?" "Gonna do it soon." "Me and you." "You and me," George says. "Everybody's going to be nice to you. Ain't going to be no more trouble. Nobody going to hurt nobody nor steal from them." Lenny said, "I thought you was mad at me, George." "No," said George. "No, Lenny, I ain't mad, and I never been mad, and I ain't now. That's the thing I want you to know." He desperately wants his friend to hear, before he's dead, just how much he loves him. Lenny begged, "Let's do it now. Let's get that place." "Sure. Right now. I gotta. We gotta." And George struggles to do it, but ultimately he does it. And then you get this bizarre end. After all of this heartache, we are left with two characters on the stage. First, Slim gets it. And Slim tells him, "Come on, George, me and you will go in and get a drink." Again, the only thing he has to look forward to now. Go in and get a drink. Go in and get a temporary pleasure to erase the pain of your life. That's all he has left. But Slim understands why he's hurting so badly. Slim said, "You had it, George. I swear you had it. Come on with me." And the only two people left on the stage are Curly and Carlson. And Carlson said, "Now what the hell you suppose is eating them two guys?" And that's the end. Well, we have that there because Curly and Carlson would never understand. They haven't risked the companionship that would take for them to understand this sense of loss. And so you basically have this choice by Steinbeck. You can live lonely and protect yourself from this kind of pain, or you can live with companionship with the complications and get the joy of this balancing act, but then risk the fact that you may lose this person. And George clearly lost. The best laid schemes of mice and men often go wrong. George's grief and pain is sitting there knowing he won't have his balancing point with him anymore. And so a tragic end to the story. And we harken back to the poverty theme. Something as simple as a temptress becomes an unsurmountable obstacle to them overcoming their poverty, to them getting to their dream. We've mentioned that before, how the poor have to battle a lot more. Any small problem becomes a big problem in their world. And you can just see through this last chapter all of the themes coming together and closing. And the dream is dead for George. Maybe the dream isn't dead for Lenny. He is, but he got to end his life with his friends there and with hope. He avoided the grief and pain at the end because George never left him. So that's a few things to think about as we close up this book. Contact me if you have any questions you want to talk about the book. Thanks.